Welcome everyone to our evening. This is Southsea Sangha online, and we have the lovely Jilna Shah joining us tonight for an evening of rest. It's going to be very experiential, and it will be for 2 hours. And I will leave Jilna to explain more about the structure. My name's Claire. I'm one of the volunteers for Southsea Sangha, and I'm still getting used to this online way of being with each other. And I was saying to Jilna before we started, I'm deeply grateful for this evening session. Tensions have been a bit high just before I came online, so I can feel some real kind of stuff going on in my body, which it would be nice to kind of have a bit of space to let that be and settle. So thank you all for joining us this evening. So it's going to be 2 hours long, as I said, and so it's not going to be the normal structure where we have a special bit at the end for just asking questions. There is the opportunity to ask questions throughout, but it'll be in a bit of a different way. But if you do at any point want to post a question for Jilna to answer, then if you go to the Ask a Question button at the bottom of your screen, you can post questions in there. Also, before we start, I'm just going to read out the group guidelines. So it's just for us to have an understanding of how best to be with each other online. And I'm going to post a link to where you can see them in the chat now. So by all means, have a look while I'm reading them out. So the guidelines are to so try it on, be willing to try on new ideas or ways of doing things that might not be what you prefer or are familiar with. Practice self-focus, so if you do choose to communicate, then speaking about and from your own experiences, and attend to your own responses. Do not speak for a whole group or express assumptions about the experience of others. Intent and impact, understanding the difference between the two. So try to understand and acknowledge impact. Denying the impact of something said by focusing on intent is more often destructive than the initial interaction. So if you do choose to communicate in the chat, then when you are communicating, substituting the word but for and or both. This practice acknowledges and honours multiple realities and truths. Refrain from naming or shaming yourself and others. Practice giving skillful feedback and watch your own tendency to move into positions of power under or over with others. Practice self-love. We encourage full participation by all present. So if you take note of who is communicating in the chat and who is not. If you tend to communicate often, consider moving back and taking up less space. If you find yourself communicating less, then the invitation is to move up and try taking up more space if you feel moved to. Practice mindful listening. Try to avoid inner comparison or commentary. Try actually listening. Listen with an open will. Be willing to be surprised, to learn something new, to change your mind. Listen with your whole self. And the last bit is about confidentiality. So take home what you learn, but not the identity of anyone who's shared anything now or later. If you do want to follow up with anyone regarding something they say in the session, ask first and respect their wishes. So lastly, before I hand over to Jilna, is mentioning dana. So this evening's dana is going to be split for the teacher for your time, and it's also going to be split with the charity, providing support to India's Dalit community who have been really adversely affected by the COVID situation. If it's okay, Jilna, I can post a link to for more information for people to look up.
Yeah, please, thanks.
So I'll post that in the chat. Really important cause. I've just posted a link to that. So we offer these sessions freely, and we'll want people to be able to access them regardless of their financial situation. So absolutely, these are freely offered, and to enable us to continue this work, those of you that are able to support us and feel supported by these sessions, we invite you to go inward and consider actually, if you're able to offer something, what you would be able to offer us, and make any donation by pressing the Dana button at the bottom of the screen. There's also a link to our PayPal account and our bank details that I will post as well in the chat shortly. Just going to do that now. I'm not very good at multitasking.
You're doing a great job, Claire. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think that's it from me, unless I've forgotten something, which I may have, but
thanks a lot, Claire.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll sort of hide in the background now, but I'm always going to be here, so
thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. Welcome, everyone. I was going to say good evening, but I've seen that we've got folks from Canada and I don't know where else. So good morning, good evening, whatever it is where you are. So let's just start with a couple of minutes of silence. So just taking our seat wherever we are. So just starting with a pause. Just arriving. Feeling the ground beneath you. A sense of rootedness. An anchor. And feeling the breath as it is in the body right now. And you might just want to take a few longer and slower, deeper breaths. And allowing some of the day that's gone before this moment just to settle. As you begin to arrive a bit more into the body, heart, mind of now. Connected to body and breath. Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome again to anyone who's just joined since then. So we just started with a little bit of stillness. And throughout the session, I really encourage you to try and keep that connection with yourself also. So maybe 50% keeping that connection to your own breath, body, sensations arising and passing, and 50% just letting the words that I'm saying just be there. And I'm going to try and remind myself as well to keep connected with myself. And one thing I really like doing, and I do in some of my sessions, is getting people to do the Gin Shinjitsu Hook. So this is something where you take your hands out in front of you, spread the fingers, and just tuck them underneath the armpits and roll the shoulder blades down. This can be quite a comforting self-hold that we can do. It's especially nice for in this lockdown situation where maybe a lot of us, I know I am, are missing touch. So if you'd like to, while I'm talking, you're also welcome to rest back like this. So I guess I should start by saying something about who I am and a bit about my work and practice. I think there's a lot in the bio, and I always find it awkward. I'm like, what would people want to know? So I guess if you have any kind of burning questions or anything that you would want to know, please ask them. I always like to know what people's favourite crisp flavour is. I think you can tell a lot about a person from that. But so for me, like I wrote about in my bio, a lot of my Dharma practice has been very much linked to my, I wouldn't say work, but my call as someone who is active in the world in social justice settings. And I came to the Dharma when I was at university, studying a politics degree, actually. And for me, it seems like this wasn't by chance, that these two paths were kind of running parallel alongside each other. And I oscillated a bit, during sometimes it was more of a focus on political action, sometimes more of a focus on the Dharma. But I feel like where I'm at now, there's a lot more of a synergy, that these paths are firstly not separate, which we will talk more about, and that there's just a lot more balance and they're running a lot more side by side. And I'm really interested in how Dharma practice and spirituality, so I don't mean just Buddhism, though that is the path that I practice, how that can inform our activism, how that can support our activism to be more sustainable, more effective, more loving, but also how the world of activism and social change can help us to start decolonizing our ideas around the Dharma, especially for a lot of us practicing in like these Western Buddhist traditions. So that's something that's been really interesting for me. I spent a lot of years working for NGOs and charities in the social justice sector in the UK, on anti-racism stuff, working with migrants and refugees also. And then I spent quite a long time in India working alongside Dalit and Adivasi communities there. And where I'm at now is my work has kind of shifted away from these institutions and structures to more working in communities, so as a movement and meditation facilitator. And the work shifted a bit more. I'm working with a lot of grassroots organizations who are working to enact social change, who are also now really getting that we need to work in a way that is a lot more sustainable, working in a way that helps prevent burnout and stuff like that. So I'm really lucky to be in this position of working alongside some great organizations and individuals. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the structure of the session, because I'm not going to be talking for too long. So I'm going to talk a bit about the theme, and then we're going to have a meditation. And then we'll have a little bit more talking. And that's also an opportunity for if anyone wants to share anything in the chat or ask questions. Then I think we'll have a little break, and then we'll have a longer period of movement. That's going to be some Yin Yoga. Bit more talking, and then we'll end with a deep rest meditation. So that's kind of how it's going to go. I can see in the chat that some people are having problems with the browser. I hope that gets sorted soon, but if there's anything I need to know, if you can type that in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so a bit about the theme of this session. So it's called Resting Back. And Daniel from your Sangha, first I meant to say thank you for inviting me to do this to Southsea Sangha. It's a real joy to do that. I've heard a lot about how buzzing and on it and radical your Sangha is. So it was great to be asked. So thank you. So I came up with this title, I think a couple of months ago, when we were very much more in lockdown. And then at that period, what I was thinking about is, for a lot of us, I think this lockdown journey has been quite a roller coaster of, we've probably felt a lot of emotions under the sun. I know I have. And there was this period where I really felt this sense of groundlessness, this real, like the rug had really been pulled underneath, like from beneath me. Maybe some people can relate to that feeling, I don't know. It was this really, although I know that the nature of things are that they're always changing and there isn't a lot that we can be certain about, there's something about the whole COVID situation and lockdown that really made that really quite in your face. I think I had this period of really feeling like there just wasn't a ground, and it felt kind of scary and shaky, and I was doing everything under the sun that I knew in terms of grounding techniques and breathing like this and walking like this and everything, but I just found it really hard. And then I started to ask myself the question, and with the support of people in my own Sangha, so how do we rest back into this groundlessness? So how do we cultivate a relationship with that in these conditions that does create a bit more ease, and how can we rest back into that uncertainty somehow? And then the moment changed, and we had the and still have the uprisings in the US and the ramifications of that, globally, resistance here in the UK, worldwide, and it really felt like things changed again. So I was thinking, well, this wasn't my primary thought, obviously. Oh, this resting back theme, how does it fit now? And my favorite, I saw a really brilliant tweet about this change from this kind of lull for a lot of us, if you're in the privileged position where it was a lull of lockdown, and then this sudden gear change. So this is a tweet from Asma Resists, someone on Twitter. And she said, I personally think it's really cool how we all went from learning how to make banana bread to learning how to abolish the police in a matter of weeks. And I was like, yes, that like kind of describes for me that sudden gear change. But more seriously, I think for a lot of us, what's been going on with the Black Lives Matter struggles being a lot more to the forefront now and a lot more in our collective consciousness, is that a lot of us have an impulse to do something. And that something looks very different for all of us depending on what our positionality is, or what our identity is, how we identify, but also what our relationship has been, with these issues up until now. So for some people, it might be the first time that they're waking up, and it's this moment of, whoa, I've been asleep, I have so much to learn. A great place to be in this bardo, this opening of, a portal, like Arundhati Roy has been talking about in relation to the pandemic. This does also feel like a portal. Then you have people who are more directly affected by what is going on. And obviously that's a very, very, very different experience. And then there's where I'm at, kind of in this middle of, I'm not white, I'm not black, I have relative privilege from being South Asian, yet I have experience of racism. That is something that I experience a lot. So, but I think something unifying is that there are a lot of us now with some kind of an impulse and intention to act. And for me, it feels really important that that action comes from a place, from a wiser place, and a place where we can act in a way that is skillful and that is sustainable longer term. So going back to the resting back theme, my thing was, I don't want people to think that I'm just saying, chill out, rest back, it's all fine, there's nothing to do here. That's not true at all. So I wanted to make this point that this resting back theme, especially in the context of broader social justice and dismantling oppressive systems, is not a passive resting back. So it's not this, let's just lie back, everything's perfect as it is, let's accept everything as it is. Because that, to me, really speaks to this kind of spiritual bypassing where we can, I think, unskillfully use the dharma to absolve ourselves from our complicity. Inaction does feel like complicity in upholding these structures. So I love the quote by Angela Davis around this, where she says, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. So this is an active way of being in the world. And I think the place of rest is really, really important when we are doing this crucial work of trying to change the things that we can't accept. So we'll keep returning to that, and towards the later part I'll talk a bit more about the political aspects of rest. But on a really simple level, I guess, what do I mean by resting back? And I relate to this on like quite a micro and like macro level. So very simply put, it's this feeling of like when you've come home from a long day and you just crash out on the sofa and it's like, hopefully some of you are in that kind of comfortable crashed back position right now. I should have said feel free to lie down or get into any kind of shape that you want to. And also I love baths, so I thought about is that feeling when I get into a really nice hot bath and I can just rest back, and it feels like this release. And then there's something in this quality of rest for me that is about not cultivating. And I know in a lot of, or in some Buddhist meditation, the emphasis is on active cultivation. Whereas there's something for me in this quality of restfulness that is more about letting things be. And Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about this. He talks about it like mindfulness, practicing mindfulness as being more of an undoing. So resting in the immediacy of our present moment experience. He says, to practice mindfulness is thus a matter not so much of doing, but of undoing. Not thinking, not judging, not associating, not planning, not imagining, not wishing. And for me, my own practice, it's like when I can just actually rest back and get out of my own way a bit, this quality of restfulness really makes my practice a lot more enjoyable. It's like I can actually genuinely rest back into that experience, a lot more joy and ease. And also the getting on the cushion or meditating in whatever form that is becomes a lot less of a chore, and it's somewhere where I want to be. It's a practice that I want to cultivate. All right, I think that's quite a lot of talking already, and you have been promised an evening of rest. So we will now, unless there's any questions, we will go into a meditation. And you have the option of lying down if that's where you're at this evening. So please listen to your own body and take what I'm saying as suggestions, invitations, and please choose the option that feels the most restful for you, the option of most ease. So you can lie down if you'd like to, or sitting upright. So just taking a couple of moments to come into a comfortable meditation posture. And if you are upright, then allow yourself to be in this upright shape, but also relaxed. So the orientation in this meditation is this one of relaxed, wakeful presence. So beginning by taking your seat in this moment, in this body, heart, mind of this moment. Feeling the support under you, grounding through the sit bones, or if you're lying down, then having a felt sense of your bones making contact with the floor. And allowing the shoulders to rest back and down into the shoulder joints. And then having a sense of the whole body breathing. So no need to change anything. Simply allowing the body to be breathed. Whole body breathing. The front of the body alive and breathing. The sides of the body breathing and being. And the back of the body breathing. Every tiny cell in the body breathing. And taking your awareness to the breath as it breathes through the heart center. Breath breathing through the heart. And allowing the heart to relax, to soften as it breathes. And then taking a scan throughout the entire body, just listening with a gentle and receptive, open presence to the body. As you receive sensation moment to moment. Allowing and honoring all of these sensations. And listening inside the body with the heart, listening with the heart. A loving, listening presence. That meets thoughts also, but just letting them be there without the need to judge. And as we listen inside the body, taking this quality of listening to the world just beyond the body, also to this vast space around us. Listening to even the sounds that are the most furthest away at the moment. And again, when thoughts arise, letting them be there and pass through like clouds in a clear sky. Listening to the silence within the body, the silence that the breath moves in and out of. And the silence around us in that vast field of open awareness. Awareness resting back in awareness. And when the mind wanders, as it does, we can come back to that anchor, the contact of the body with the ground or with the chair. Or we can come back to the breath and experience where we're feeling that most presently, with a light touch. Resting back in the sea of vast, open awareness. A vast awareness that is loving, allowing, and holding. So taking a few moments just to do any kind of stretch or movement or yawn or anything that needs to happen right now for you. If anyone had any reflections or thoughts or anything following the meditation, then feel free to share them with us if you'd like to in the chat box. So maybe, possibly for some of us during that meditation, we might have started to drop down a bit more, started to perhaps access a little bit more calm or a little bit more quietening. Maybe that wasn't your experience, that's also fine. Maybe there was a bit more of that quality. And in a lot of Buddhist meditation paths, this is referred to as shamatha practice, so the calm abiding, this settling. And that's really important, this settling down, calming down. I know for me that's just so important, to keep going back to that, calming the F down, when things are really happening, as they often are. And it's this becoming more embodied. So rather than leading and steering a lot with our cognitive mind, that incessant chatter that a lot of us often experience, it's this resting back into something that feels more useful. And for me also, there's something about, I was talking to a friend about this practice, and he was saying that for him, this shamatha and this calm abiding practice is actually an act of self-love. It can be like when he sits down to practice, especially with this orientation of trying not to judge these thoughts and push things away and creating even more of a battleground with ourselves, I guess, as we do. I'm very good at doing that. He was saying he sees it as an act of self-love, to really give yourself that, okay, I'm going to rest back and meet my experience, whatever is there, without expectations. So I liked that, thinking about it as an act of self-love. And this isn't to cover up or push away difficulties. And I think sometimes we can be sold, especially when we start to practice, or we can have this myth that meditation is about being blissed out and experiencing these amazing states and all of that. And then I know I was a bit like, oh, this is quite messy and difficult. And yeah, so that stuff can all be there. And this whole idea of resting back isn't that we push that away or we're craving after these experiences. It's more about creating space in the body, heart, mind for everything to be there. And that's when we can start to experience a bit of softening around those hard edges or those places and thought patterns that feel a bit more stuck for us. And from a yogic perspective, because also that's part of my background in terms of teaching and practicing yoga. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Patanjali talks about the balance between effort and ease. Not just in the yoga asanas, the postures, because that's obviously just one part of the whole yogic system, but the balance of effort and ease in our practice in all areas. And that's definitely been something that really spoke to me when I started deepening my yoga practice, because I notice very often, it's died down a bit, but especially about a decade ago, I was very good at the effort and really applying myself this really earnest approach to practice and to everything else, because we see our patterns in practice, right? It shows up, we show up as we are in the world. And that made me think of the NAP ministry. I don't know if people here follow them, but you really should on Instagram. They are brilliant, and I'll talk more about them later. But they call this they mention a grind culture to describe the kind of culture that we're in here in these Western countries that are rooted in capitalism and white supremacy. And underlying these systems is this culture of grinding, of pushing, striving, extracting, producing, that is very like go, 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 go. And that can really fuel this must try harder approach. I'm always shocked at how much I've internalized this, even though I'm someone who would identify as, you know, staunchly anti-capitalist and not vested in all those modes of being. I have internalized that. And when I sometimes think, okay, so what's the difference now in my life? Like, what qualitative difference has practicing Dharma made in my life when I think back to when I started engaging more deeply in all this? I use the analogy of like a yo-yo. I used to love playing with those. And the range seemed to be, of my life and my experience of life, tended to be like really up and down, really like, whoa, very, very large range of motion. So very extreme. I seem to have these patterns of hitting life really hard. And I am a quadruple Aquarius. It's called a stellium. I don't know how much people know about that, but yeah, Diane says she's nodding her head in agreement. Yes, I have this very airy tendency in me that can be very flighty. So in practice, I did notice, yeah, I'd either hit things really hard, and in my life, in terms of doing things, it would be very hard. And then I'd have these periods of like extreme kind of down and low. And actually, that was also at a part in my life where I struggled quite big time with depression and anxiety. And so it was just this roller coaster that was actually very, very exhausting. It wasn't fun. And now I think about it in terms of actually that felt like the exhaustion of conditioned existence. They talk about the 1,000 joys and the 1,000 sorrows. And I really felt this oscillation. And the difference now is that I still yo-yo, so I still think it's a yo-yo, but the range of motion is a lot narrower, and that feels a lot more comfortable. And that's partly due to these practices of like steadiness and cultivating this resting back into something and cultivating more of this quietening of the mind. Again, the Yoga Sutras talk about that a lot. So I also wanted to make the point overtly that this process of becoming more embodied is really important in itself. So beyond shamatha, like this calm abiding as a prerequisite for insight meditation, vipassana, it is really important as an end in itself. Especially for folks who have received messages around their bodies. So being a certain way as being disposable, as being not desirable, bodies that have historically experienced a lot of violence, the very act of becoming embodied and experiencing aliveness in the body seems like that actually is a form of decolonization, and that is really important in the path to freedom and liberation. So I did want to make that point. And it's also, a lot of bodies have received messaging that they should shrink, take up less space. So it was nice in the group agreement that I saw here that Claire read out, that thing about being mindful of the space you occupy. A lot of us have been told for various reasons to shrink and to not show up. And part of that has manifested in our bodies as this quite literal shrinking. So the becoming embodied can really help us to heal that as well, if that's messaging that we have received. Okay, so that was a bit about shamatha practice. So in what excites me about the Dharma, there are many things that excite me about the Dharma, but is that we can also go deeper. So the shamatha practice was like about mindfulness of sensations, and that's great and has a lot of value in it. But we can go deeper, and a lot of Buddhist meditation does see this calm abiding, this resting back as a prerequisite for insight meditation, vipassana. And I did a retreat recently, which was brilliant. It was run by Guy House, but facilitated by Bonnie Duran and Anushka Fernandopulle. And it was called Decolonizing the Mind, Cultivating the Root Causes of Happiness. And in that, they were looking at what, so what do we rest back in? Or maybe that's my spin in terms of the phrasing of it. But I took it as, well, what can we rest back in that will cultivate happiness and not leave us trapped in these false refuges of seeking this, pleasure and pushing away things that we don't want. So the question we come to is, what can we actually rest back into? So as a foundation for happiness in ourselves as individuals, but also as a basis to ground our skillful action in the world. And Anushka in that retreat spoke really beautifully about the 3 lakshanas, the 3 dharma seals or marks of existence, whatever you might know them by. Now, I really recommend, Guy House has the recordings from this retreat. It's really worth checking out. So the first one, and there are so many ways to explain these, so I'm going to try and keep them brief. But the first one is a Nietzsche Impermanence. So everything that exists as a result of conditions arises and passes, and everything is continually changing. And I remember in a workplace that I was in, someone had a calendar where you pull off every day, like there's a new quote or something, and usually they were pretty naff. But one day I saw one that I liked, which I think is a kind of layperson's way of talking about impermanence. And it was, the good news is that everything changes. The bad news is that everything changes. And I kind of liked that. The second one is anatta, non-self. So this I that we so strongly identify with and think is real in terms of a concrete separate self is actually not a thing. And then dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So nothing that is of this conditioned world can provide this lasting satisfactoriness. And again, I was talking to a friend and moaning about someone and how they were being and blah, 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 and going into blame and all my stories. And she said to me, you know what? Basically, people do what we don't want them to do, and they don't do what we want them to do. And I was like, oh yeah, that seems like, for me, a really good explanation of what suffering is. So anyway, in this retreat, Anushka was, amongst other things, saying that a big part of why we experience this restlessness or suffering is because we are fundamentally not accepting or realizing these 3 marks of existence. We're denying them all the time and building our worlds and our thought patterns and our actions in a way that isn't congruent with these ultimate truths. And I like the way Anushka put it. She said that contemplating these marks of existence, the lakshanas, can help us to know true ease and joy beyond our changing circumstances. Okay, so I wanted to stop talking about that, and I wanted to invite us to explore some of these, and again in a really light touch way, through some gentle movement. So we are going to do some Yin Yoga, which I'll talk us through as well. If you haven't had a chance to get some cushions and blankets and possibly a book, if you need something under the back of your head, it's a good idea to do them now. And I'm going to adjust the video a bit so you can see me on my mat. And also, if you don't have a yoga mat, that's no problem. You can just rest on a blanket or on the floor. And we're going to start by coming down to the mat or the blanket. and coming into a shape that is called Constructive Rest. So the knees are bent if that's available to you. If that's not, then just lying down. If it's available to you, then bending the knees, having the palms facing up or down, letting your pelvis be heavy. And if you'd like to, the knees can come in to touch each other for support there. And taking a few deep breaths here. Letting everything be heavy. So in Yin Yoga, as the name suggests, we are emphasizing more the qualities of being as opposed to doing, which is associated more with the yang kind of energy. And the emphasis is on softening, allowing, resting, and releasing. And often we emphasize being supported, so hence us using cushions and things later on, so that we can let go as much as possible of muscular effort and just really be held by gravity and by our skeletal structure. And we hold the shapes for longer than in a lot of other yoga modalities, so that we can really begin to experience this softening and this changing flow of sensations. So feeling into the bones, starting from the head, the skull, shoulders, spine, lower back and pelvis, knees, and feet. Resting back here. Constructive rest, they call this one. And then from here, wherever you are, just hugging the knees in towards the chest, having a little rock back and forwards, massaging the lower back a little bit, allowing the shoulders to remain in contact with the ground. And then bringing the soles of the feet to meet each other and the knees flare out to the side. I should have got my props. So it's this hip opening butterfly shape. And what you might want to do here is place cushions underneath your knees so that you can really let go and release there through the hips. So the palms, the soles of the feet come into contact with each other. The knees flare out to the sides of the body. The hands rest either to the sides of the body or maybe gently around the pelvis area. And having an awareness of the entire body. in this shape. And then noticing, is there somewhere in the body that feels okay or even good right now? So for me, it's my pelvis area. So wherever that area may be for you, just gently resting your awareness there. With a gentle curiosity, noticing and experiencing any change that's happening there too, in that area. The sensations arising and passing and changing moment to moment. And when the mind wanders, as it does, and we see it a lot more when we hold the shapes for longer, coming back into the felt sensation of this shape. Body, breath, heart, mind. And then from here, gently taking your palms so that they're supporting both hips and inviting those knees to come back in towards each other. So the legs are standing. And then we're going to do a kind of windscreen wiper motion with the knees. So just letting the knees sway slowly from side to side. So moving again with this quality of loving, gentle presence. And then when the knees come back to the center, just staying there a bit, taking your arms out to the side, so in a T shape, or if that creates any kind of tension in the body, then you can bring a bend into the elbows. And then we're going to bring the knees in towards the chest. And tilting the hips slightly towards the left side as you then allow the knees to come towards the right side of the body. And using your cushions, you might want to place some support underneath that lower knee there so you can really rest into this shape. You may wish to place a pillow in between the knees. And as you feel into this shape, noticing and experiencing your emotional landscape in this shape. How am I feeling? What is the emotional echo of this shape? And what is my relationship to how I'm feeling? just as sensations arise and change and pass, so too does our feeling tone. Just resting back here. And then from here, slowly bringing the knees in back towards the center. And resting here a few moments. Feeling into the sensations that are still happening, even in the stillness. And then bringing the knees in towards the chest again. And tilting the hips slightly to the right side of the body, and then allowing the knees to fall towards the left side into this spinal twist on this side. And again, you can place cushions underneath that lower knee or between the knees. And arriving here. In this shape, in this moment. Noticing and experiencing where you feel the breath the most in the body right now. And seeing if there is the possibility of a bit more softening, a bit more releasing. Just resting back. And once again, perhaps this time taking our awareness to the heart center, coming into contact again with that emotional landscape. What is the feeling tone now in this shape? And as we rest back in this shape, perhaps it's possible to create space for whatever feeling tone we are experiencing in this moment. So even though it can look like perhaps we're not doing much in Yin Yoga when we're using these very simple shapes, often I can find it a very challenging practice because we are becoming so still, and perhaps we are noticing coming into closer contact with our patterns of being and tendencies. So watching that, if those kinds of things are coming up. So then removing any of the cushions and any of that kind of stuff, and bringing the knees back again to center. And then from here we're going to roll gently to one side of the body. And then find the laziest possible way to come kind of upright, but we're going to eventually meet in child's pose. So one way of coming into that is coming onto all fours. So the knees are directly in line with the hips and the wrists are in line with the shoulders. Spreading the fingers, bringing the toes in towards each other so they meet each other, and resting back onto your heels. And then again taking the cushions, the blankets. You might want to place something underneath your head as you fold forward, and the arms can be by the sides of your body or in front, wherever feels good. And for some people, if that is not a resting position for you, some people don't find it comfortable, you can lie back and just hug the knees into the chest. So resting in child's pose. And here, just tuning in with the sensations of aliveness. So any tingling, pulsating, vibrating, any sensations of temperature. Feeling the tingling perhaps at your fingertips, allowing the hands to be soft. As we rest back here. And having an awareness of this whole shape, the body as it feels as a whole. And then having an awareness of skin. So feeling into the skin and the face. And the neck. The chest. Belly. The back of the neck. Shoulders. Mid-back. Lower back. And with this awareness of the skin, having an awareness that the skin is empty, empty of a self. Just resting back. Resting back into the emptiness of skin. And from here, gently starting to come back up to unravel. And from here, coming back onto all fours. And then we're going to take the right knee out in front of you to the right side, just beyond the right hip, and extend the left leg back. And we're going to place some support underneath that right buttock so we can rest back and lean into there. And the opposite leg is extended, taking the arms out in front of you and making a cushion with your palms, or maybe grabbing another cushion and resting forward here into this hip opener. This one's called Pigeon. Full body awareness in this shape. And now feeling the sensations of flesh. So soft, squidgy flesh. So the flesh in the face, the fleshiness of the cheeks, the heart area, the fleshiness of our bellies, and the internal organs. The flesh in the hips, flesh in the thighs, and the calves, and the feet, flesh, empty of a self. Just resting back. And from here now, releasing any of the props, the cushions, and taking that right knee back in towards the center and the left knee back in towards the center. And then we're going to come onto this on the other side. So grounding through the hands, taking the left knee out to the left side, just beyond the left hip, extending the opposite leg back, and again propping up that left sit bone so you can really lean back and rest into this pigeon shape, and finding your way to make again a cushion either with your hands or using a pillow in front of you, and resting back here. Coming into a full body awareness in this shape. Breath, sensation, feeling. The wholeness of our experience right now. And then coming into a felt sense of the bones. our skeletal structure. So those dense, heavy bones, hard bones. So an awareness of the skull, and the neck, and the spine, the shoulder bones, and the bones in the upper arms, our bony elbows, lower arms, and bones in the fingers. These bones too are empty of a self. And resting back here. And from here now, unraveling again. So coming back onto the hands and feet, removing any props. Then we're going to come to lying on the front body, so lying on our bellies. And just resting here for a moment, making a little pillow with your hands. Listening inwardly with the eye of the heart. We're going to come up onto our elbows. So the elbows are about shoulder width apart, and the elbows are a couple of inches in front of the shoulder line. Palms are facing down. So it's this gentle back bend. This one's called Sphynx. So you might want to rest here. You might want to interlace your fingers and create a bit of a base here. You might want to rest on a pillow. You might want to hold your elbows. So choosing the option for you at the moment that gives you the most ease and rest. So feeling into the spine. I like to think of it as like little fairy lights, like how the spine just dangles in this gentle back bend. Full body awareness in this shape. And now tuning in, noticing if there is anywhere in the body right now that doesn't feel so comfortable, that doesn't feel so good. And taking your awareness there and breathing into that area. And keeping in contact with that area. So maybe the very simple act of even taking our awareness there and breathing there has changed it a bit. Feeling into that changing flow of sensation and experience in that area. And then simply resting back. And then removing any props again. And we are from here eventually going to come to a kind of sitting position. So taking any kind of movement that your body feels it wants to do to travel to sitting. And we are going to end with a forward bend. So coming onto your sit bones, you might want to pull out that fleshy bit so you have that nice contact with the ground. So it may be that you sit on something actually, so you sit on a book or a cushion. I tend to need a bit more height here. That's the first thing. For me, this works a lot better when I bend my knees. I'm a lot more comfortable, and then I hinge forward from the hips. I fold forward, having a cushion to support my head, and I just come into my forward bend like this. For some of you, it may be that you like to have the feet extended and active, and you hinge forward from here. That's not so good for my back. So choosing the best option for you. Making sure that your head is supported so that this can become a space where we can begin to soften a bit more, or continue to soften a bit more, and to release. Simply breathing here. Just being here. Noticing any holding or overexertion, and just stepping back, resting back here. Meeting our experience again as it unfolds, moment to moment. And then when you're ready, taking your time, slowly unraveling, coming back to upright. And it may be that you just want to stay in that kind of stillness, or for those of us who need a quick comfort break, let's come back in 2-3 minutes. So time at least for me to go and have a pee and we will come back for the last bit of our session together. So yeah, let's aim for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Not used to this. I'm so used to Zoom and seeing people, so I'm just hoping that people are back. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a bit about the place of rest in the current context. And going back to this thing that I was talking about in terms of a lot of us having this strong impulse to take action at the moment, which is appropriate, of course. And for me, in my work, I've definitely experienced burnout that a lot of people who are active in communities or people who identify as activists or people who care for others in our communities often face. And it comes for me from this like trying too hard at everything. It was like when I worked in India alongside Dalit and Adivasi communities there who experienced a lot of extreme violence, really extreme stuff. I got into a really bad space where it was like subconsciously, it was like if I just gave so much of myself and if I exhausted myself enough, somehow that would just result in something good, or that I was trying at least, and that would somehow be enough or yield a beneficial kind of outcome. And although I trust that that was coming from a well-intentioned place, it wasn't the wisest way for me to work. And it did end up in a period where I experienced PTSD and had to be signed off work for a while and really step out. So that's something, I guess, why I emphasize the place of rest and restoration so much in the work I do in the community. One of my yoga teachers says that you teach best that which you need the most. And that really resonated. I was like, oh yeah, why am I always going on about rest and restoration and self-preservation? That's because it's something that in my life I've often really struggled with, and it's still a journey to try and get that balance. So this feeling of burnout and overwhelm, which maybe some of us are here now, even in these moments as well, can be a really painful and exhausting place to be in. Bonnie, in the retreat that I was on, that I mentioned earlier, she talks about this as perhaps being rooted in over-identification with the suffering, or like this extreme empathy with others. And I think that's especially the case if you're in quite close proximity to your activism is like with communities that you're also from, or you have a lived experience of also, that can really contribute to this feeling of, I won't want to say kind of like excess empathy that can really be quite traumatizing and vicariously like re-traumatizing. And Bonnie said something, she said that often activists here can struggle with a compassion and loving kindness fatigue for themselves. And that's definitely something I've experienced in my own practice. It was like pouring from an empty cup, and that analogy is used a lot, but all this stuff that I was trying to do out there for others or in the world, I actually really struggled with myself. So I think rest can be a really powerful antidote to this must do, like lots must do now thing, because at a very basic level, we're letting go of all these expectations of ourselves, and we're truly accepting and meeting ourselves in a much more of a kind way. And I have definitely experienced guilt around this before in practice, of like, I can't rest, there's too much to be done. And there was a lot of myself in that, actually, now when I look back. And it can be seen as an aside to the work. And in some activist circles, there can be this propagation of like this bravado around almost like who can work the most, who can burn out the most, who can push out, productivity the most. And that can also be really difficult space to be in. And once I was on a meditation retreat with Lama Rod, shout out to Rod if he's here, I think he was joining. And I was in this stage of burnout, but I haven't quite realised it myself, whereas he showed me that that's where I was. I was really on the edge in terms of last year was a very difficult year for me and a very stressful job. And I lost a loved one under quite difficult circumstances. So I can see the yup. So I was really at my edge in that way, and I was finding it hard to accept that. And Rod reminded me that why we rest, and he was like, you rest back so that you can step back in. So we're not resting just to feel like, oh great, you know, this is like some temporary nice thing for us as an individual. That's great that we can feel that, but it's going beyond that also. So he makes this distinction that I really liked of rest becoming a conscious practice of restoration and refueling, so that we can enter back into our communities to be of service, you know, through our skillful action. And drawing on Audre Lorde's self-care as self-preservation and not indulgence, Rod makes this really helpful distinction between our motivation for rest. So when we're thinking of the collective and of acting skillfully in the world, what's motivating our rest is actually to the collective, to be able to eventually enter back in and to extend that energy into contributing to communities where we are not relating based on systems of oppression and all of that stuff. So I found that really helpful, that distinction between the individual and the collective. So resting together as a Sangha is also a really powerful way of cultivating this, it occurs to me. And then I've also thought as well, in this moment, like where there is this impulse to rest. Actually, I think one of the most, not to rest, to act. One of the most skillful things we can do is just pause, actually, to step back. Because I think sometimes we go straight into action, so we avoid feeling the discomfort of whatever's going on. And I know I've had some of that going around when looking at how I want to respond, what my front line is in terms of responding to what's going on with the uprisings. And the best thing I've done, because I've kind of had to, because of what it was triggering for me as well in terms of my own experiences of racism and stuff, is to step back for a while. I had a period of that where I basically took to bed for about a week. I had to. Then I think that helped me to kind of re-emerge from a place where I could respond as opposed to react. And I think that they're two very different things. And I do wonder sometimes with all the incessant posting on social media, if that's a bit of a, let's be seen to be doing something quick, let's get something out there. I'm like, okay, what are we trying not to feel? Also, I mentioned the NAP Ministry earlier. I want to go back to them. So they're an organisation that explore the liberating power of naps and rest as a radical tool of community healing. And they see rest as a form of resistance, and they name sleep deprivation as a racial and social justice issue. So it's really worth checking out their website. And what they say is, folks are spiritually and physically exhausted. We are living in such an inspiring time. Rest can be a gateway to help us figure out a whole new way of living. Capitalism will die. White supremacy will die. We must be well rested and aligned with our deepest selves in order to create. Exhaustion does not serve us. So I thought that was really powerful, because this moment really does call for creativity. And if you are rooted in an abolitionist politic like I am, you can focus on what needs to be dismantled, like the prison industrial complex and all of that. But there's also, it's deeply underpinned by creativity and visioning and dreaming. So Mariam Kaba, who I'm learning a lot from about abolition these days, says, abolition is the project of building, creating, and imagining. It is a positive joy. So we need to be able to enter that creative, rested heart space at the moment as well, so that our action really is creating something different, creating something new, aside from these limited constructs and of these that underpin these oppressive structures of white supremacy, of capitalism, of heteronormativity, ableism, all of that stuff. So I find that exciting as well, that rest is this portal for our creativity. And I think there's something as well in when I was experiencing this really tough year last year and I felt really burnt out and stuff, I had this feeling like I was living but I wasn't alive. It was this like I was going through the motions, but I felt very disconnected actually from aliveness. And it's been such a joy to get that back through various ways. And I think part of it is, I guess part of being alive for me is figuring out or coming into closer contact with knowing who we as a unique individual truly are and resting back more fully into that. And I wanted to share a little story about that. When my niece was about, I think she must have been 1.5 years or something, I was giving her a bath, and it was quite a difficult time in my life. That was during this period of depression that I've mentioned. I said to her name's Akashi. Akash is the sky, so she's of the sky. And I said, Akashi, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she looked at me really like, and she said, me? I was like, yeah, you. She goes, me? I want to be Akashi. Definitely. And it was this real moment of, okay, wow, yeah, it's part of being alive is really coming into contact with who we are and what our unique gifts to the world are. So that really hit me in a really beautiful way. And for me, it's this, when I'm feeling rested and resourced, that I can actually then move from a place of, okay, what are my gifts, or what's my front line here? What can I give and contribute to the revolution? Because the revolution needs us all, and it needs everything. So unless there are any questions or comments, I wanted us to end with a deep rest meditation. So I call this the horizontal, because I like to be horizontal at any opportunity. So the invitation here is to lie down. If you've got any lower back issues, it may be that you keep the knees bent. It may be that you have some support under your head, so a folded up blanket or a book or something like that. You might want to have some extra layers or socks or anything like that to get cozy and comfortable again. And just arriving now into this shape. So letting everything be heavy. Letting the head be heavy, and the shoulders, the back, lower back and pelvis, the upper legs and the lower legs. Allowing the feet to flare out. Allowing the hands to be soft and unclenching any kind of holding there. And allowing the face to be soft. So allowing all of the tiny muscles around the face to soften, to release. Letting everything be heavy. And allowing the bones to hold you, allowing yourself to be held by gravity and the earth. And if sleep comes during these moments, just let it be there. It's not a problem. So allowing everything. Awareness of the whole body lying down. And just allowing my words to wash over you, without needing to apply any kind of effort. A light touch. Taking the awareness to the head, the crown of the head. And the face, so the eyes and the back of the eyes. Back of the eyes soft and resting back. Allowing the jaw to soften. Awareness of shoulders. Middle back. Lower back. Sacrum. The pelvis and the width of the pelvis. Back of thighs, back of knees, shins, heels and feet. Whole body breathing and being. Really allowing the shoulders to rest back and down. Kind of melting quality there. Kind of like ice to water and water to air. And as the back of the body rests back and down into the earth, allowing the front of the body to soften and rest back into the back body. So there's nothing to do here. And no one to be. Just resting back. Awareness resting in awareness. Letting everything be simply as it is. just resting back. Softening, melting, releasing as we simply rest back. And from here, wherever you are now, coming back into the body, into the breath, and taking a few longer, deeper breaths. So slowly beginning to bring a bit of activity back into the body through the breath. And as you take a few more active breaths, maybe bringing some small movement and motion back into the body. So it might just be having a full body stretch and kind of yawn, maybe wriggling the fingers and the toes. And you've got the option to carry on lying down or come to sitting if you'd like to. We're going to close with a bit of a metta prayer. So taking a moment to connect with the heart, relaxing the heart area. And tuning inwards. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be free from suffering. May all beings be happy. May all beings be well. May all beings be free from suffering. And that brings us to the end of our time together. Thank you very much. And if you don't have to rush off, then, and you can spend a bit longer hanging out horizontally, I really recommend it. So in any case, thank you very much to you all. And thank you to the folks at Southsea Sangha also. Bye for now.